Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at the School Board's Committee for Finance, and its name is Budget, Finance, and Growth. We're happy to have you. We have a very extensive agenda today and need to be able to get through it somehow, and much of it is very important as we make future decisions. So we welcome you and thank you for being here, and we will get started. Is it possible that the folks that are first up are all here, or do we need to move the agenda a bit? Preschool Promise, I think, is up first.
I think Hector's online.
Great.
And my update is quite short as well.
Well, I would say we appreciate that, but we're always happy for a long one too, because it's always good news. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Well, I just wanted the committee to be aware that we are in the middle of budget season, as so is the district, and I've been interacting with the treasurer to make sure that our numbers, our preliminary numbers are incorporated. We currently will have our first budget hearing next week in the Finance and Audit Committee, and then from there on to the board for our first draft look at our budget. But just in general terms, our budget will look very similar to what last year's budget looked like, given that we expect to return to a pre-COVID environment, or how it used to be before COVID, in the upcoming fiscal year. But that's all. I'll have more details after our FNAC meeting, Finance and Audit Committee meeting next week.
Thank you. Mr. Messer, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you for the update. Good to see you, Hector.
Hector, one thing about that is if the Finance Committee will recall that the master agreement allows for a 3% growth on tuition assistance value. And so both organizations will be using that new value.
That's correct. Thank you for reminding me of that. That's part of working in tandem together.
Yes, of course. All right, thanks, Hector.
Treasurer Wagner, would you explain that for the public that may be listening?
Yeah, so one of the purposes for this preschool expansion money and the levy, the $15 million set aside, is to offer tuition assistance so that all 3 and 4 year olds can have access to high quality preschool. And that tuition assistance is calculated on a per pupil basis at different income levels, and there's a matrix that calculates the different quality rating of each center. And so that value grows with the inflation each year, and it's allowed to grow to 3% each year.
Great. Thank you. There are no other questions. Hector, good to see you. Thanks for the report. Madam Treasurer, would you introduce our next guest, if you will?
Absolutely. So I believe both Jeremy and Bernice are going to be speaking about E-rate, or is just Bernice?
We know Bernice is.
Bernice will be primarily speaking, but I do just want to thank everybody today for giving us an opportunity. Typically, we do an update kind of around the E-rate program, just as a reminder and a cover of our contracts annually. But with the pandemic and everything that's been going on, we've had a little bit of an extended delay this time. So, we did ask Bernice to come in and kind of just give us our normal overview and an update on the program. So, Bernice, take it away.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Hi, everyone. I thought I would give a bit of background first about what E-rate is. E-rate is an FCC program designed to aid schools in getting affordable telecom services. And participants in this program can receive reimbursements from 20 to 90% depending upon their free and reduced lunch percentages in their school district and on their rural or urban status. And although this is a federal program, when reimbursements are received, there are no federal strings attached, and we can put those monies directly back into general fund. Next, how does this program benefit CPS? we typically receive either 85 or 90% reimbursement of eligible costs. And in general, we receive between $3 and $4 million in funding per E-rate funding year. Since the inception of this program, CPS has received $81 million in reimbursement. And I do have a second sheet, if we could see the second page. There we go. This information is related to our contracts that are under E-rate. The first section is the 2021 funding year. We have 4 contracts there: data cabling, internet, Wi-Fi, and our managed network services. You can see our current service provider and the discount percentage that we receive for those services. Also showing is the contract expiration date. And you may note that 2 of those contracts, the internet access and the managed Wi-Fi, those contracts expire June 30th of this year. Therefore, we were required to rebid those services in the E-rate funding cycle, which just ended. And the next section shows the 21-22 funding year, and the incumbent, Cincinnati Bell Telephone, was selected as the winning bidder for both those contracts. I can provide additional information related to the bids themselves if anyone is interested in hearing that. If not, I can just move on.
Well, you can do a little bit of that. I think that would be helpful. And also in the interest of transparency for the public, I think that would be a good idea. Within reason, of course.
All right. For the internet access bids, we received 3 from Citranet, Hamilton Claremont Cooperative, and Cincinnati Bell Telephone, the incumbent. Citranet did not include prices for the service levels we required. Hamilton Claremont Cooperative, their proposal was only for 12 locations, and the cost was more than double the lowest bid. Cincinnati Bell Telephone's bid was the lowest by far. The proposal met all the requirements, so that bid was accepted. Then for the managed Wi-Fi services, we received 6 bids for that services, but only PowerNet and Cincinnati Bell Telephone scored above a 4 on a 0 to 5 point scale. Cincinnati Bell scored a 4.7, PowerNet a 4.3. And although PowerNet did have the lowest score of the 2, they received lower marks in other areas. First, their proposal didn't confirm or really address at all our requirement that services be in place on July 1st. There was no large urban school district experience, and in their proposal, they did not agree to adhere to the E-rate program's requirement of lowest corresponding price. So again, Cincinnati Bell's bid was accepted.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And what are the challenges for our program? The program is rather complex to navigate, but the biggest challenge for us is that we are heavily audited. We are a very heavily audited district. So far this calendar year, we have had 4 audits, which have already closed with no findings, and we are currently under a 5th audit. So that's all the E-rate info I have to share, but on the screen you can see there is some information regarding the FCC's new Emergency Connectivity Fund. In the new stimulus bill, there was $7 billion has been funded to create the Emergency Connectivity Fund. This fund will allow schools to provide internet services to off-campus locations, such as the students' homes. And currently, the E-rate program does not allow funding for any off-campus services. Also, the new Emergency Connectivity Fund will allow the purchase of connected devices, such as laptops and tablets. And in addition to that, the ECF will provide 100% reimbursement of eligible costs, unlike the traditional E-rate fund. The law which governs this requires the FCC to establish regulations by mid-May for the application and the distribution of funds. And the application process will probably start in June. The funds are kept separate from our E-rate funds, but I suspect they will probably use the same framework because of the short timeline that they're on here. So that's all the information I have regarding the ECF. So unless there are any other E-rate questions, then I think that's all I have for you.
Thank you. Mr. Messer, do you have any questions?
The only one, I don't, maybe it's just because we are public and a school district of our size, et cetera, but just curious, why so many audits?
I suspect it's probably because of the size of our reimbursements. For example, okay, one of the audits that we received was for one reimbursement request, which was about $2.4 million in that one request. So if I were an auditor, I can say I audited $2.4 million in funding in this time frame, versus if they needed to audit $2.4 million in smaller school districts, that could take a lot more time and more resources. That's my suspicion. I don't have a definitive answer from them on that, but I suspect that's probably it.
The same thing happens with our federal fund audits, because we're big, it gets their dollar quota to do one big district.
I didn't know there was a dollar quota type model. Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jan, if I could ask you a question, and then I'll have one, I think, for Bernice, but how does this new available funding impact our budget? Does it take, are we going to be able to have a different source for something that we're already doing? How does it play into the CARES piece or anything else that might be of interest to the public?
So it was my understanding that they were expanding the eligibility services, not that we were going to get more money. But so I'll have Jeremy, maybe I'm wrong. Did that change?
Yes. So slightly, the ECF fund that Bernice referred to is additional funding beyond the E-rate, and they do have new eligible services. She was saying, like the take-home service. So we're still waiting on confirmation on how they're going to do the distribution and what the rules are. But it is a good potential that would replace some of our CARES spending, like the $2 million that we have set aside for Connect Our Students.
We just have to make sure they don't have to supplement some plant rules. But yeah, as soon as the information is available, we'll study it and report out.
Yeah, I was interested in that because I know we've initially thought there wasn't necessarily going to be some of that additional money, but that could be quite helpful if indeed there is. I mean, we can keep our fingers crossed. It's sort of our new gesture now, is fingers crossed on some of this new revenue, especially as you've pointed out, Jen, that it's it's not just going to come in in a big check somewhere, and it has to be the other sources have to be kind of reimbursement issues. Bernice, on the E-rate, how does this the amount of money that we're going to be anticipating now, how does it rate, and no pun intended, or how does it compare to, let's say, a 3 or 4 or 5 year history? I mean, are we spending more, getting more? Help us out with that.
It's pretty standard, pretty routine, the amount of money we get. It's typically between $3 and $4 million. We did have a bit of an anomaly with this pandemic year, and that if I could see that slide again, that shows the amounts. But for 2021, we had the funding on there, which is for the data cabling. You will see that. I think it's $458,000. We didn't get to spend that this year because our cabling crews were not allowed in the building. So you will notice that same line for 21-22 has increased significantly. We are requesting more money for that particular service. But in general, the other services stay pretty much the same. The managed network services is typically a 3 to 5 year contract, so that stays pretty regular. Our managed Wi-Fi is pretty much the same. Internet access typically goes down significantly every time there's a new contract. For the last probably 6 years, that has gone down significantly, and in fact, probably half the amount. I think this current contract is probably 1/3 of the prior one, just because that service in general, the cost is dropping industry-wide. So We will be asking for a little over $1 million, I think, or close to $2 million more than we generally do. And all of that is related to the data cabling work we would like to have done in the district.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions, or Jen, do you have anything to further clarify?
I just wanted to note that unlike our federal and state grants where we pay the money and then we get reimbursed monthly as we report our expenses, E-rate can lag as far as 2 and 3 years behind the reimbursement. And so it's not a regular reimbursement. And so the more grants we get, the more challenging our cash flow becomes if we have to spend the money first. And then we're waiting for reimbursement.
Thanks for that point of clarification. I appreciate it. If there's nothing else, we really appreciate this report. And again, fingers crossed, and thank you for managing such a complex arrangement and program. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Our third presenter, I believe, is Vera Brooks, and I believe she has joined us. And she'll be reporting there. She is.
Here I am. Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me this afternoon. I wanted to report on a few different areas with a few questions and requests also to the Finance Growth Committee. First of all, the good news is, since we have been back in 5 days, our registration enrollment has increased. As of today, we were at 1,375 students enrolled, with 81 seats reserved, as we promised, going into next year, for a total of 1,456 students. And if you remember, our goal this year was 1,500 with the pandemic and following all the guidelines. And so we are 44 students, and we are still having appointments and continue to enroll. An exciting thing is word is getting out about summer scholars. So parents or families are choosing to return back to us to participate in all the events and opportunities that CPS as a destination district is beginning to offer. So that's very, very exciting. The next slide is our stars. And we continue to maintain our 4- and 5-star ratings. We currently, from now until the last day of school, ODE is visiting all of our sites to renew our licenses and also to do our step up to quality ratings. But I'm very pleased with the reception that one of our managers, Angie McDonald, has had this year from school sites, administratively, and from the teachers and paraprofessionals to have guidance and support that we feel that we are prepared. And so far, all the visits have been outstanding. So we're very, very pleased about that. The next slide, please. I'm not sure in what order the slides are in. This is a chart that we wanted to look and start to examine where our gaps are throughout the city and where possibilities might be if we were to continue, hopefully, continue with your all's guidance and support to expand. We are very confident that our goal of 2,200, which was in this current strategic plan, will be met as we open next year. And so we want to continue to look towards the future. So every child has the opportunity for a high quality preschool. So with this chart, we roughly broke it out into East, West, Central. We then have like a school, Mount Washington for this year. Could you scroll back to the top so I could go good? Thank you. Like for this year, 2021, Mount Washington has one typical classroom, which CPS capacity based in the our guidance of how big the room is could have 18 students, but by the ODE stated on the preschool license, they can have a capacity of 20. Now, I don't want people to get a misunderstanding about this chart. So if you look at the next one, which is NOM, North Avondale, it is a magnet. It has 7 Montessori 3-6 classrooms. Our capacity, 9 preschool students with 15 kindergarten students in a classroom, we could have up to 63 preschoolers in that building. But we work with the administration when we receive the license, and they went ahead and licensed all the classrooms to give the building flexibility depending on where classrooms may move, because we have to have a licensed room to operate our preschool classrooms. So the first column is our capacity. The second column is the state license of what the building is actually licensed for. So we did that for 2021, and then we also projected with 21-22. I definitely want to give recognition to Mount Washington because their principal reached out with their ILT, and next year they would like to have a second preschool classroom. So we will be adding, that's part of our expansion, a classroom at Mount Washington next year, and then also to Miss Battle at Rising Stars at Vine is also going to be adding another classroom to her team. So by the end of the strategic plan, we will have 2,200 preschool seats. And we are now recruiting and coming up with a plan with communications and engagement. Very excited to begin working with Ms. Jenkins, Director Jenkins, as we will be planning out our summer recruitment plan, and also in collaboration with CPP to do some activities with them. So with that, the need is really looking where our gap area is in the Madisonville area. And I'm talking, we have JP Parker, but if somehow we could move deeper into Madisonville, that would be very beneficial. Around Hyde Park, many Hyde Park Oakley families have reached out to us asking if we have a preschool in their area in the Mount Lookout area. Are there any questions so far? I know I'm going.
Yeah.
briefly.
No,
Okay.
This is great. And I appreciate the clarification on the columns. I was wondering about that. Before I go to Mr. Messer, so it's generally the east side where
Yes.
we have some issues?
Yes, the east side is where we are seeing a gap. And I don't want to say far east because we have Sands, Mount Washington, Riverview, kind of further that way. It's more in that cluster of Madisonville, Hyde Park, Oakley, Mount Lookout, in those areas that have had great growth over the last couple of years as far as not just residents, but also businesses. So through their transition of growth, we see a definite need.
Yeah, I think we have noticed too that it seems to be more families, not just the initial singles that people were trying to, as we kind of brought people back to the city. That's much more the even younger families as well. So, Mr. Messer, do you have any questions?
Yeah, well, we had some ideas, and maybe there's a couple more for Madisonville, right, Ms. Bolton?
Right.
So,
Yes.
so we there's definitely some thoughts over that way, and it's definitely something that I hear quite a bit too. You talked about summer enrollment or summer like recruitment plan, but we're only what? Would you say 44 spots left?
For this year, for this school year, of reaching our goal.
Yeah.
We are still enrolling. So
okay, so we'll go beyond that even. Okay.
Yes, we could. Yes.
Good. Okay, so it's not a capacity, it's just a goal.
With COVID. Yes.
Oh, you're going to blow that out.
Yeah, my real goal is 2,200, but I have to have full capacity for that.
Yeah, got it. Okay, and then I think you gave us a nugget there that is news to me. I did miss the previous meeting, or not this one, the one before. But that if families left, because they were looking for a full-time option for preschool, they can still participate in Summer Scholars.
Are you talking about the reserve seats?
I thought you said that we're getting some families back who left
Yes.
and they were excited about Summer Scholars.
Yes, if they are currently enrolled, if you are currently enrolled this year, so this year ends May, correct? Because we follow the district's calendar. So families are opting to come back. They are, wherever they were, they're opting to come back to CPS or to newly enroll in CPS because they do hear the option of they can start, participating in Summer Scholars and getting involved in the district.
So will those families get like an advertisement saying, we know you left last year. We're expecting that you'll be back. By the way, here's Summer Scholars Program. Here's how you sign up.
And it's funny you mentioned that, Mr. Messer, because I have a meeting Monday with Director Jenkins.
Wonderful.
And yes, that is on our agenda to discuss all recruitment, how we can reach out to families. I'm not going to say our families. I'm going to say all families in the city and let them know that we are a wonderful district and we need to get our kids enrolled and get active again.
Well, I said it before. I do think Summer Scholars is going to be this thing we look back to where CPS stands out in how we ensured that our kids were prepared even with a pandemic. I am so excited about it. My kids are excited about it. And we started off this call just having a quick conversation about there are 4 families that I've gotten connected with because of our soccer league who were preschool families and say they're coming back. So they're going to love this. They're going to love it.
Which is a great segue. Oh, thank you. Great segue to my question to this committee. My question to this committee is for Summer Scholars. I know, and Treasurer Wagner, maybe you can help me out with the correct wording for this, is being supported by CARES funding. So for our families that pay tuition, am I to charge them tuition or will it be available to them at no cost? It is, Summer Scholars is the month of June. I believe there's a total of 19 or 20 days. And then in August, we are going to be having a pre-K jump start, which will be 9 days prior to the opening of school.
But at least
So
remember, I asked that question back when we went through this, and I think it was that CARES Act funding would cover that.
Okay.
I think that's what I heard, but maybe somebody can validate.
To be right. So yes, you asked me if CARES Act could help pay for preschool, and the answer is yes, it can help pay for preschool, but I don't have the authority to waive tuition without the board's consideration. So I thought I would offer that. So Rob, can you take the PowerPoint down? Thank you. That way we can see each other a little bit better.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, recognizing that the board would have to do that, just as the superintendent can waive fees, without necessarily us saying anything, but in this case, that the tuition piece would take board action. So if there was a recommendation coming from the Finance Committee, Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee, to do that. I know that Mr. Messer's right, because I think it was certainly maybe 5 board meetings ago where Mr. Messer raised that issue, and Jen said possibly, probably, and then got some confirmation. Jen, is it your understanding, or Superintendent, is your understanding, because we don't have General Counsel on, does that waiving of, if indeed that's what is of interest to the board to do, is that a resolution, or is that a superintendent's report or a treasurer's report? What would we know?
I probably any of the three would work. If it's the will of the finance committee, I think I will have our grants people to just double check to make sure that waiving the fees is acceptable to them. I don't want them to think that you have to. There's no rule that you have to continue the way you were, by not waiving this rule. So we'll double check that just to be sure we don't get ourselves in trouble.
And we would be recommending that if indeed we do, and we've got member Bates is with us now too.
There she is.
We don't say that we're not waiving the fees as much as we're waiving tuition for those particular weeks because CARES is taking it because it's extending or it's recovering learning. So it would be, as Vera said, those 9 days or whatever, I think that's great. And then I know we don't vote in committee, but if Mr. Messer or Ms. Bates have any more comments about that particular topic, we could at least wink and blink and say that we would make that recommendation. Ms. Bates, do you have a comment?
No, I think it's a good idea to be able to include the tuition paying as non-tuition paying as long as we can use the CARES Act. I think that would encourage more people to send their children. So I'm in favor of it.
Great. Mr. Messer?
Yeah, and I think there's a way for us to also use that as a never leave something behind that could be used for good. And I think there were some families who said, gosh, we were remote, I was paying, then I had to pay like tutors to come in and sit because I'm working and this and that, and then I'm paying for this, and they're not even there. So to say, look, here this is not gonna be added cost. Service provided by the district, blah, blah, blah. I think there's a really good story there too. So
we'll investigate further just to make sure that we're not violating anything. And if everything's fine, then we'll put it through in one format for the board to approve.
Right. So that would be an action item coming out, another action item possibly coming out that might speak to the superintendent based upon Ms. Brooks's position on the east side, that we continue to investigate expanding the seats in that particular area where we know that there are customers and students in that, whether it's Madisonville, Mount Lookout, Hyde Park, I think you mentioned, not the far east, but that, and Oakley. Yes, great. Ms. Bates?
Yeah, I have a suggestion, and I know that the prices of real estate are zooming in this area as well, but I bet the Hyde Park and East Walnut Hills parents would go over to Evanston if we can find anything in Evanston that's so close. And I know that the Evanston community is looking to purchase that church, and use it as community space. That's just kind of an idea. The church that's adjacent to that charter school.
Gosh.
I mean,
great idea.
So that's.
They just had that press conference.
That's my stopping ground. So.
Yeah, why don't we keep that on the table, and also the J.P. Parker reference out there. I think those are great ideas. So that will be an action item for the superintendent to look into with Ms. Brooks. That would be fabulous. Vera, did I see a map? Was there a visual? Was there a map?
There was a map.
Of your presentation?
I think.
Rob, do you have a map for Ms. Brooks? Just, me, I'm visual. And I hate to ever produce a document we don't use. That's the social studies teacher in me, and it's a map.
I think it's 1C, Rob.
Ms. Bruckner, you know which it is?
I think it should be item 1C as in cat.
There you go.
There we go.
Vera,
So
in closing, can you kind of teach us what this says and see if that verifies what you've already kind of advised us?
Yes, so this is a map of all of our CPS preschools, and we didn't have space on the map to put how many classrooms are each, but I could do that for you if you wish.
No, that's okay.
But the stars are preschools or school buildings that have preschools within them that are mainly expansion over the years. So that's one funding source. The blue squares are where we have preschools, and we are also housing. The buildings are quite generous to allow us to have a registration enrollment hub at those sites. So any parent can walk in anytime, and we will provide them service to enroll immediately. The circles are CPS pre-K to grade 12 schools, such as Euler and Riverview East. And then the diamonds are the standalones, like Chevy at Westwood, Vine. Those are more of our satellites. So where Carthage was just preschool, it is now very successfully changing into a pre-K to 1 next year, to then join and be partnership with Hartwell of a 2 to 8 building. So we are looking at those different ways. So it just shows you every building on here has a preschool in them. And Aiken New Tech we put as a pre-K to 12, but it's really a pre-K and then a 7 to 12. But that has turned out to be a very successful site that if I could find another classroom in that building, we could fill it again. That's a very popular site.
And that goes along with one of the career paths out of Aiken as well, as I understand it. So that's wonderful when we can match and mix and, put it together in that way. I think that's great.
Yes. But you can see where it's like the star of J.P. Parker, AWL, Riverview, all that area within there.
Yeah.
We have nothing.
I love maps. Anybody have any further questions, or Vera, do you have anything to add to this fabulous report?
Just thank you for your time.
Thank you for keeping us
Very
going.
exciting.
Yes.
This is the future.
It is.
Yes.
Thank you.
Literally. Those little people are the future, aren't they? Well, thank you very much, Vera. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Madam Treasurer, I think you've got the next 3 items, so we'll kind of count on your timing, because we know you like to get to the point, that bottom line kind of thing. Yep. So if you go through those 3, that would be great.
I will. Rob, can you bring my PowerPoint up, please? There you go. You can skip to the next. Okay, so here's a summary of what I spoke about last night, but I'd already planned on sharing this today. It's just a chart of all the different grants that we're receiving help from. Starting at the top, we have the first CARES Act, or ESSER. The spending date is September 30th. We received about $20 million. We have about $2 million left to spend. The Coronavirus Relief Fund, that's hard to say, is done, is complete, even though we had until December to pay it, spend it down. We already have. The broadband connectivity grant was $151,000, and that was complete in January. Hamilton County spent some of their CARES money to all the Hamilton County school districts. So our allocation was $1.8 million, and that was the due date was December 30th, not December 3rd. And so that's complete. So the 2 active grants are CARES 2.0, which is the $93 million allocation, and we're just now developing the budget. Summer scholars will come out of this fund. And then on March 31st, I believe it was, the infrastructure bill was announced. I'm sorry, back up. CARES 3 was announced, was the America Rescue Plan, and the district will get 2.2 times what we received in CARES Act 2, so that calculates to $205 million. And we're trying to figure out how to balance those two grants together. Just want to make a note that we can't spend the first dollar out of CARES 2 until we're done committing CARES 1. So it's a very delicate timing situation. So the CARES Act 3, the American Rescue Plan, is the spend down is in September 30th, 24. So we have time for that. And then the America Jobs Plan is the infrastructure plan that was announced on March 31. And there's, I forget how many billions of dollars is allocated to K-12 infrastructure for modernizing buildings, kitchens, Wi-Fi. And so we're working through those details to figure out how much Ohio will get versus, and then how much Cincinnati Public Schools will get. I think this one might be a little bit different than them giving just a dollar allocation. We may have to apply for dollars with a plan, and so we'll monitor that very closely. And so as I said last night, most of the grants, the 3 eligible categories of spend are preventing the virus spread, which covers a lot of cleaning and PPE, and remote learning. So planning, preparing for remote learning, and preventing learning loss. And so those are pretty broad categories, but they're very diligently checking all of our expenditures before they reimburse us. Okay, so in total, we'll receive $322 million over a several year period to help us through this pandemic crisis. So you can go to the next slide. So here's kind of a summary of how we use CARES Act 1. Remember, there's $20 million allocated. The auxiliary schools, our non-public partners, received about $3 million. The other grants we do not have to share with the non-public schools. I think they're getting their own allocations directly. But at the beginning of the grant, we were trying to prepare for over the summer of how do we figure out how do we going to do distance learning and remote learning, and what devices do we need and what cleaning supplies do we need. So we spent a lot of time in the planning and prepping, $700,000 over summer learning, and then the remote learning, the lion's share of that was the devices. There's about $7 million in lease payment on devices. And then, of course, the virus protection. And so we have $500,000 that hasn't been allocated out yet, but some of the dollars that were allocated haven't been spent out yet. So we are looking to see if we can repurpose those. Next slide. So the next topic on the agenda is the budget process status. And so I shared this last night at the committee of the whole meeting, but I thought it warranted a repeat for whoever's watching for the public. So we shared the estimated cost, the very first draft of the estimated cost of the strategic priorities that were designed by the board from the determining what the new CPS would look like. We are in the process of, all the budgets were submitted and they're in, and we're in the process of reviewing for accuracy and alignment to the strategic plan. And we will present the first public operating budget in May at that COW. And then, May 19th. And then May 24th is when I'm required to do the 5-year forecast. So we'll align all that together, and then we'll start adding some of the other major funds like student wellness and CARES money. And then on June 7th and the 16th, we'll do our 2 public hearings with a target to have the final budget approved at the very latest, June 28th. If you recall, I need to have that the appropriations resolution complete and filed by Hamilton County Budget Commission before I can cut the first check of the new year. And so we're hoping to have the budget approved earlier, but that's the final deadline. The next slide. So at Chairman Bolton's suggestion, it was a great idea. A new way to get feedback through board members is to work through the committee structure. And so we're asking that the committee structures review, as we present information, review that information with the lens of their committee purposes and give us some feedback from there. And so I just made a little graphic of each of the committees. Okay, next slide. Third topic, new goals for next year, very draft form. I'm still working on the fifth one, kind of dependent on how things can work out. But the first one is our new service delivery model, where we're trying to improve the need to receive cycle and alleviate the burden of all those financial transactions at our schools and departments. And so we're trying to develop a team that will take over those responsibilities for them. It's a lot easier to stay on top of the quoting rules and the RFP rules and chasing down receivers and invoices and stuff like that if you have a small group of people that are highly trained and supervised. So we're hoping to do a small test of change this year yet. The second goal is actually implementing the budget redesign that we're working on right now, and towards the goal towards equitably distributing our budgets, the needs of the students first. So that's kind of a shift in thinking, both individually and collectively. And then third goal is to implement year 2 of the transition succession plan of my role in the department. And then goal 4 is to improve upon, we're working together with the IT department and HR and talent development and developing some new dashboards that are more connected so that we can start using each other's data to analyze. But we want to take our financial transparencies to the next level in terms of the performance of the district financially and the production performance of the department. And then I'm working on another goal, and I'll give you an update when I finish that one. Any questions on that?
Does anybody have any questions, Mr. Messer?
Sorry about that. It actually was about the timeline.
Next slide. Oh, the budget timeline?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to back up a little bit? There you go.
And I knew we were going to talk about it here, so I didn't bring it up last night. One before this. Yeah, there you go. I think just for optics, there were lots of things that went into the first box there.
Yes.
And so I might call out the engagement that was done. So there was different staff engagements, right? There was the board engagement. Then there were some other things. And, I think sometimes, people get very critical, rightly so, if there's not seen that, there's inputs coming from different places. So my only suggestion would be to add that as like this went into that starting gate. All these, because there's a lot of work,
right?
And I would give yourself credit for that, because people might say, well, so the first time the public's going to see this is what, June 7th? No, I mean, different stakeholders have been engaged. Your elected officials are engaged. You're this, and tell that story in the upfront.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sorry I wasn't clear about that, but typically the first time we come out with the general operating budget, I spend quite a bit of time on the process, educating everybody on the process and noting all the engagement and time and activities that went up to that. This slide was just intended to kind of go with what's next after this strategic initiatives conversation for the board. So
yeah, and I will never miss an opportunity, as we said earlier, as you're presenting for the public who's watching, that yes, always be deliberate about the things that we do for public engagement and board engagement and all that, because I think you've done a really good job this year.
Right. Duly noted. Thank you.
On that same chart, before I go to Ms. Bates, on that same chart, if you would build in, and I think Ryan is absolutely right, build in, if you would, the both the finance meeting dates in some way, shape, or form, and then also, since we are now trying to get the board committees, figure out a kind of a graphic way to present that, because I always appreciate how much you do visually for us. I think that would be great, because this is a chart that'll be very much in the public's eye. So I would do that one while we're on this chart. And I just had a question about the previous, the American Jobs Act.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the one we might have to apply for? Is that I missed?
I believe, yeah. Flip back one more, Rob, if you don't mind. There you go, that one. Yes, the last one down there that says TBD.
Yes.
We don't know any details. It's just news release kind of information. But there was something in the language that we were looking at yesterday that they talked about being shovel ready, and alluded to the fact that maybe it might be first come, first serve, and I can't remember if it was in a news release or somebody else's commentary, but we want to make sure that we're ready to jump on that when it's released.
And that's very important for this committee since we are, budget, finance, and growth. That would be something to help us. Maybe we'll have an opportunity there if some of that's infrastructure or facilities or what have you. So thank you. I just need a clarification. Ms. Bates, did you have a comment before we go back to Mr. Messer?
No, I'm good.
Great. Mr. Messer?
Yeah, on that topic, if it comes up to be that way, I mean, is there an opportunity to involve our government affairs team that might help tell our story of these things that we're doing in career development and lots of other things that might be pertinent to the decision makers for whoever would be divvying up those dollars?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. And certainly, too, maybe we would require somebody that is hooked into the federal efforts as well. Most of our districts, we kind of hope that at least our congressmen vote for it, but that doesn't look likely. But
well,
certainly,
Mr. Mooney's daughter in the White House, that could help.
That's right. But at least maybe I know we do have two good supporters in the Senate level with Mr. Portman and Mr. Brown. But yeah, that would be great. I think it's a great suggestion for us to be looking into that. Any other points or comments? Great, thank you, Jen. Appreciate all this work.
Okay, so yeah, stop right there. So in a conversation that Ms. Bolton and I had not too long ago about how we're trying to align to state evaluation system, she asked me to look at the time frame by which the evaluations are done. So typically the treasurer's evaluation has to be complete by March because I live on a different timeline than everybody else does, as does the superintendent. And so I just thought I'd point out here that our contract, my job contract cycle is from August 1st to July 31st. The fiscal year is from August 1st to July 31st. The fiscal year is July 1st through June 30th. And the evaluation cycle that's current is April 1st to March 30th. So it's oddly aligned or misaligned, more like it. And so I was trying to think of measures that could be used in the evaluation cycle. So typically you would think for a CFO, you would want to use financial measures. Well, our year end is in June, so the results normally won't come out until August, the preliminary results anyway. And so I don't, if you want to back up the evaluation system to August, but since the cycle, the contract starts on August 1, that doesn't seem like a good alignment either. If you look at the financial audit, that's issued to December, so that really doesn't help with that situation. And then the 5-year forecast is done in November and May. So we can certainly continue to talk about it. I'm willing to do some more research, but Ms. Bolton asked me to just kind of share this information for thought on how to improve the system. I don't know if you have any feedback on that.
Thank you, Jen. I know we're going through a similar discussion on timelines for the superintendent, and so we'll maybe be informed by that, and maybe this will help inform the timeline. I know the superintendent's going to be submitting a timeline next month to SAC, so we can continue this conversation. Mr. Messer?
Yeah. If I were in your shoes, this would drive me absolutely bonkers. Because it doesn't, I can't imagine my work where like everything would be, everything's done consistently. And I think our fiscal year is our fiscal year. So could we, not maybe this year, but could it be planned that we would amend the schedule in a way to evolve to get everything on a fiscal year?
We can certainly look at
moving the one up and the one forward 2 months or 3 months.
The only thing that makes that difficult is the requirement by the state to. So in a year where a contract is coming up for renewal, like this year for me, right? My current contract ends July 31st. you have to tell me in March whether you want to renew my contract or not. And in order for you to do that, you have to have 2 evaluations under your belt for that year, for that performance year. Okay. So the timing of that, so in middle of a contract, it doesn't really matter as long as I'm getting performance feedback and I'm pleasing my bosses and producing. That's great. But it's when it comes to that final year of the evaluation or the contract is where it makes a difference. And I'll work with Dan. Maybe he can do some research and see if we can't make that better.
Yeah, and maybe just benchmarking. What do others do? Because it definitely feels out of cahoots.
Yeah.
Of sorts.
Yep.
Well, this is why we wanted to introduce this conversation, and I think it's useful. So let's say with that, if you can talk with the general counsel a little bit, that would be helpful. And it is the board policy that there has to, and law, Ohio Revised Code, that we have to have some sort of what we're calling now for the superintendent employment status in March. But yeah, it's just at the weird time to be able to do anything from an evaluative standpoint. But let's keep this conversation going. Any other comments, Ms. Bates or Mr. Messer?
I'm good.
Good. Jen, does that take? Go ahead.
That takes care of 4, 5, and 6, and I'll take the PowerPoint down and come back to other business afterwards. Is that okay?
That would be great. And while we get set up for transportation's update, I will say to board members, committee members, number 9 on the agenda is just a quickie. It's the policy committee is reviewing all the policies and separating philosophy from actual work and what have you. And Jen is kind enough to volunteer, sort of volunteer, to review the 6,000 series so that we can report back to policy even this month as to what are philosophical kinds of commitments for financial issues and what are the actual work and day-to-day work that has to be done. So that takes care of that item. And so what the other business that she has, we can come back to that at the end. But now, transportation update. We know, too, that transportation is going to be also a topic, as I understand it, for the Health and Safety Committee as well. Chairman Bates?
Transportation relative to safety, because I had, and I know other board members had, and I even city council members had been receiving complaints that buses were way behind schedule or and no communication with transportation. I guess they were calling for a student and nobody would answer the phone or it would go to voicemail. Health and Safety requested, and people expressed that they were afraid to put their kids on the bus or cease to put their kids on the bus out of safety concerns. So the questions that transportation needs to address for health and safety is, is there a solid system of communication, not just voicemail that rings indefinitely or somebody who really can't give answers? When parents call frantically because their children are not where they're supposed to be, do we have a way to track buses and or students or just first students? And can we pinpoint those routes that are having difficulty? Is it because of an occasional sub? Is it because, I know we're at the beginning of the school year, so to say. So I expect beginning of the year problems, but communication, they've been at this, first student has been at this long enough that communication shouldn't be an issue, even if routes and problems with routes is in the beginning of all of this. So that's the expectation of health and safety and that assignment.
When is we'll let you talk about that. When is your committee meeting where this will appear on your agenda?
It is. I'm checking my calendar right now. the 26th.
Okay, and what time do you all meet?
We meet at 4 o'clock.
Okay, great.
We'll have this presentation, the SRO presentation, and the superintendent requested a presentation.
Super. All right, well, that heads up to the public and heads up to Mr. Johnson, and appreciate your working on that, Ms. Bates. And Mr. Messer is on that committee with you, so that's will be useful. We'll have a good interface between the two committees. I think that's good. Yes, Mr. Messer.
Yeah, and just I'll give kudos to the superintendent. I got looped into a Facebook group that was just basically called Parents for Quality Transportation. I forget what it was. Somebody invited me to that, and multiple times I've passed those on, and then I get a nice, hey, thank you so much, Ryan. Got somebody that called me that night. They were like shocked it was like evening, or the other one, like one of the other ones in the morning. So, I think that several that have come my way via that group have been addressed. And one is current. I literally got a text because I've shared my number with that group in case I don't see. And today there was a situation where it was saying the buses were 20 to 30 minutes behind, but the kids and she thought, well, maybe I should go just in case. She had little ones, and they actually were right on time. So, just something else to put on the radar to make sure that the timing interface is working correctly and the parents are getting the right information.
Appreciate the work on that, and Melanie's right that it seems like the beginning of the year and these things happen, but we have just in a few months another beginning of the year where this can't keep going on. So appreciate it. For us, Mr. Johnson's here, I think in part today, because we've had a continuing discussion, and to his credits, he's been willing to deal with us on this, where we are financially, in anticipation as well as contractually. We've been asking him to kind of delay the extension of contracts, especially for yellow bus service. And we have more vendors than just First Student at Yellow Bus. He's also had to be very aware, as we are, that the state legislature is putting all kinds of new, at least I believe they are, I don't believe it's happened yet, restrictions. So we've been talking about that as to how we're supposed to be operating with the charters and the private schools. And also the fact that we have not for next year, but this year we've had to have at least 2 of our high schools be using the yellow bus service. I think those have been the areas, Mr. Johnson, you can correct me if you would, those have been the 3 areas that, 3 or 4 areas that we've been talking about in the Finance Committee. And do you have any update on any of those items, or some other item you need to share?
Awesome. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me the opportunity to speak before you guys. I do want to kind of acknowledge some of the comments beforehand and express my commitment to actually correcting those issues as we move forth. And as Board Member Messer pointed out, when things did alert us to those problems, it was pretty much myself and my operations supervisor reaching out to those parents to address those concerns and come up with a plan of correction with that. I would like to say that many of the issues does not rest on First Student. We do have Queen City Transportation, Peterman Transportation, and UTS Transportation. And actually, over the course of the last 2 weeks, a lot of the strain has been coming from UTS, and the other vendors are stepping in and supporting them. And so it is a network. We look at a network of providers, and so we don't like to place the blame on any one provider. We are all in this together to support our students. So we are working very diligently to do so. In a financial world, we are essentially competing against a stimulus package when it comes to our drivers. And so when they could get more money with a stimulus package than they can operating a bus, it kind of puts us in a dire situation in many days. Also, the other factor that has come to play is that we have had to quarantine some drivers because of COVID. And so when that comes in place, then that also shortens up our driver pool and availability for staff. So not excuses, but just reality of the facts that I wanted to present for you before I get into the financials of things. Board member.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brian, if you could hold on. Brian, okay. If you could just hold on for a little bit. So you are going to present a little bit of the financial piece and talking about the contracts and what have you. Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Messer.
Yeah, I think the only bit of advice, I wouldn't say this if it wasn't a couple of times. I think I have gotten feedback that as they spoke with somebody in transportation, there's one woman who was trying to get her child's move, and you may know this situation. And I'm going to just go from memory because this was late at night when I took this call, but she had submitted the form where it was said to, and the form had the wrong location. So she then resubmitted it to somewhere else. And so, down at the end, whoever she spoke to within CPS said, well, you sent it to the wrong spot, and and at the end of the day, technically it was on us because the form had the wrong thing. And then I think there's another one where she said, I felt like I was getting in trouble, and like it was my fault. I'm just trying to get it solved here. So customer service and engagement, life is 2% what happens and 98% how we respond. I think that goes very well in this case. People will forget about what happened, but they'll remember how you made them feel. So if there's any type of opportunity to just bring that story to life, as all of our customer-facing staff members, this is one in particular, though, with transportation and kids and getting them safely home. I think we just have to be really sensitive.
And
Absolutely.
I appreciate that comment, and we'll move on. But yes, this is not the first year, and it's not about COVID. It continues to be an issue, not only the financial unsustainability of transportation, but also that whole communications, customer relations piece it just continues to be a problem, and it's bad for the district. So we'll be working hard to correct that. So Mr. Johnson, if you can go ahead with the financial outlook, and also I'm very interested in where we might be regarding the use of Metro for the coming year, because I know we have had more reservations about extending the yellow bus vendors right now, but thinking in terms of, are we going to be ready to extend with Metro maybe before we do the yellow bus vendors? So Mr. Johnson?
Sure. So to kind of begin, I got 3 bucket areas regarding a contract that I kind of want to make the committee aware of. The first area that I want to touch on, and it's in the debriefing report that I submitted to your offices for review, so you should have it in your packet, was regarding our fueling services. So that is one of our major contracts that we have for the district right now. Currently, we utilize Hightowers as our fuel provider. What we are working with in conjunction with the purchasing department is to execute an RFP that will go out for publish in May. The goal is to award a new fueling service that will be comprehensive to not only our yellow bus and dedicated van services, but also for our fleet internally with facilities, food services, as well as security team. And so making sure that we have a comprehensive contract that covers all of our needs within the district. And so we will be looking to present hopefully a contract that the board will approve going into the next fiscal year with that. So I just wanted to touch base and let you guys be aware of that coming forth.
Is that is that the contract for fueling only?
Yes.
So I'm not sure what the nutrition and all that other stuff is.
Because each of those areas have a white fleet of vehicles, trucks that we use.
Thank you.
So, yes.
Cool.
The other area that I want to touch on, which is the primary area of our core business, which is our yellow bus and dedicated fleet with our van services. We have been actively engaged in meetings with the leadership of each various organizations, from First Student to National Express, who holds both Peterman and Queen City, as well as the leadership with UTS. to definitely see where we're at with our contract and our terms. And by no means do we want to enter into an extension without addressing some of these reoccurring issues that have plagued the district for the entire 5 years of the existing contracts. And so some of the areas that we want to definitely focus on is definitely the professional development piece and making sure that we tighten up that language within the contracts addressing how our transportation personnel is not only interacting primarily with our students, but also when we talk about customer service and the experiences, as Board Member Messer noted, we want to make sure that we have quality people interacting with our families, our schools, when they are calling in as well. So definitely putting some parameter and some language around that into this new extension is a need. Then also looking at our equipment and resources, making sure that we have proper equipment and resources to specifically help and support our DSS population, students with disabilities, and making sure that there's no interruption in their services and that we have a fleet that's right-sized to support those students going forth into next year. The other area is the big area, which is service expectations. We definitely want to put some more stronger language in there regarding on-time performance as well as our customer service piece. We feel like those are the two Achilles heel that kind of make or break a good quality, quote unquote, service. And we want to definitely make sure that we're putting some parameters in there that protects the district so that if the vendor is not performing at the level that they're performing, what are the financial implications on that vendor for poor service? And so we definitely want to look at some creative language to tighten that up to make sure that we are definitely getting what we're paying for and that we are not paying for a service that is subpar. So with that, we are prepared to, with the blessing of the Finance Committee as well as the full board, to move forward with a extension. We still believe that that is the best course of action for the district going forth. But to your point, with public transit being a unknown variable right now, given the governor's plan with the budget and possibly some new law language regarding the transportation of non-public schools, it does present its challenges. I can say that I have had a couple of meetings with SORTA and their top leadership regarding our current contract. Right now, they are in the midst of labor negotiations. And so those negotiations, once finalized, will actually determine some of our rates. And actually, our core rates are built off of an hourly rate, which is directly linked to the drivers and their personnel wages. And so they are looking for an increase in their wages. So that will transfer into an increase in cost for us with that overall package. They are also adding and increasing their fleet over the course of the next several years with their new levy that was passed. So this upcoming year, they're looking at increasing 25 new buses, new routes into the equation, and then doubling that in year two. This is concerning for us because we have a small amount of driver pool. And so that means that, are they going to be taking drivers from our yellow bus world into our public transit world? And how can we define a system that has a good equal balance where we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to say? We are hoping that within the next couple of weeks that their labor negotiations will be finalized and that we can get the rates solidified for next year. The good thing is that we still are in year two. Next year will be year 3 of their contract, so we're still within the contract term, so it doesn't have to be a brand new contract, but every year, like all of our contracts, they are renewed. And so we want to make sure that that, again, is going before the board for approval there. I can say that one of the sessions that we are doing with SORTA on a regular basis is in full preparation for our healthy start time resolution. We will be prepared to fully execute that resolution as a whole going into next school year, which means the interim use of yellow school buses for Hughes High School and Woodward will now go away, and so they will revert back to public transit with Metro. So I'm happy and very pleased to say that we are moving forth with that endeavor there, and we are on track to make sure that all our students and all our schools are in full compliance with that. We have already worked with the Office of Community Engagement in executing some communications out to the schools and to the families regarding this resolution and all of our high schools going into that new start time. So we are fully prepared to execute that with fidelity, given the wishes of the board, given the resolution from 2 years ago. Outside of that, I did want to give you guys a little insight to our plans for executing a full RFP to really wrap around and address the issues with our yellow bus and our dedicated fleet. And just to give you an insight to the five-step process.
Mr. Johnson, let me interrupt you before you talk about the RFP, because right now the initial piece is the whether or not to extend to our vendors, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and you did say during this that until we address these issues that are being raised by the public and by the district, didn't want to move forward, but then it sounded like you are, and it appears that you are asking us or going to be presenting to the board sometime very soon some sort of extension of the current contracts. I'm not sure that the board is reassured enough about how well some of those issues have been addressed. I mean, are you saying you're going to address it by changing the language of the contracts?
The contract is our starting and end point. And if it's not clearly identified within the contract, it's hard for us to hold them accountable for said service issues. And it is a balancing act in full transparency. When you are left with a very limited pool of resources, in this case is drivers, is very little that we can do without fully jeopardizing the quality of service for students.
But it also is my understanding that the charters and the privates, according to this new law, are going to have as late as August to tell us what they need of us, which is of concern too, since we are transporting them. But I am still worried about an extension of the yellow bus drivers, vendors, and for Metro, they are in labor negotiations, and that is something to be worried about and concerned. But help me out, because we know kind of how many high schoolers we're going to have, and we know we're going to not be offering yellow bus for anybody at the other high schools unless the law makes us put 7th and 8th graders on yellow buses, which is also part of the new proposal. So I just think it's still, as much as and you've delayed, and I appreciate it, it still seems premature to be extending when we're not quite sure. But I may be in the minority on that, but I want to express my concerns on that. I know time is of the essence, but again, we can't start the next year either in any kind of confusion. So I know you want to move ahead, but I also don't want to move ahead when we don't even know what all the rules of the game are going to be. Right. So that's of concern to me. But I am confident about the Metro piece. You're right. We'll lose bus drivers to Metro. We're going to lose bus drivers to other jobs as the economy turns up too. So we have limited resources. So a more grand plan is going to have to be developed, and hopefully we're not going to be living under the COVID requirements too as the new school year starts. But we don't know that for sure. So I think we're still in an unusual place. And I know you want to do kind of a master plan RFP that moves in beyond next year into the following year. And I think you're right to be doing that. And I appreciate you trying to think about that. But I still am worried about this extension stuff. But
if
go ahead, sir.
My immediate concern really is to make sure that we have services post July 1. If we wait too long, it will be very hard for my team to plan for any services for summer school, ESY, extended school year, credit recovery past July 1. And so that's why I'm really kind of pressing the issue to really look at what is the best way that we can navigate this, because after June 30th, I have no resources when it comes to the yellow bus or the dedicated vans to be able to utilize for our students. And so I don't want those students to miss out on those great opportunities that the district is planning for our students going forth this summer and everything. And so that's my immediate number one concern right now.
And that's important, and I hate to hog the conversation, but this is a great point that you bring up. Our current contract takes us through June.
Yes.
So our current contract takes us through summer scholars, but we had not necessarily added that to the contract with the vendors.
No. So traditional school year with an extended school year through Department of DSS and everything, that typically goes from June all the way to sometimes the beginning of August. And so my concern is for that population of students that happens after the new Summer Scholars Program, we won't have any resources available. We will be able to utilize our resources right now for the Summer Scholars Program in June, but it's the post that ESY, that credit recovery, those other traditional normal things that we do, that will be a concern for us to be able to have the funds and the contracts to be able to execute that service.
Thank you. And one last question for me, and again, I'm sorry, members. The routing that we do is done by us, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that's kind of internal. And the communication piece, are we continuing to shop that out to the vendors instead of having our own central communications and customer relations group do anything?
It is a hybrid. This was the first year that we brought in a hybrid mix. We did not hire in our internal staff until a month ago. So we were relying on the vendors, which we housed here at the district, so we have a better oversight of how they're interacting with the public. And
that might be something too. I know this is a third year on that. We've tried a number of different things on the customer relations. So thank you. And I appreciate your being forthright about some of this information. Member Bates, Member Messer?
Good.
Great. Thank you. And now, Mr. Johnson, I'll let you finish. And I'm sorry, I was a bad chairman and I interrupted you a lot, but this is pressing. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
You're totally fine. I was just going to give you guys a layout if we are able to come to a consensus on how to move forward with our contracts and everything, that we do have a clear plan in place of how to execute that out and ensure that we will have a contract that fully supports the new shore as the district is moving forward with things. And so a couple of things that we want to lay out here is our RFI process, where we are looking at what is new industry best practices and equipment that is available to make sure that's incorporated within this new RFP. The next place is actually looking to draft and approve for the release of the RFP. So whether or not the RFP gets released or not, we still need to develop that RFP and finalize that RFP and make sure it incorporates all the visions that we as a district are planning in that new shore, so we could be malleable and be able to adjust accordingly to the needs of our students. So this just provides that timeline to be able to say, hey, if we go with the proposed timeline that I presented to you guys back in February, this is a little bit more in detail about when it comes to the RFP process. Of course, getting to the point of awarding a new contract with a service date that will start in July of 2022. So with that, I just want to give you guys a high-level overview of where we're at.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Members have any questions or comments?
Nope.
Thank you. And so what your request is that you want to be able to move ahead on extensions, possibly, but that has to be, superintendent and others have to kind of tell us that, but that's still there. and a giant kind of RFP for 22-23. But right now it's the extension. I think it's reasonable on the fuel. That begins to make sense. The Mr. Hightower group and whoever else might be competing for that. All right.
So next on the agenda, you ready?
Yep.
I'm ready. Yes.
Okay.
He's ready. Kevin's looking chipper.
Sorry,
Well,
I jumped the gun there.
Before you start, Kevin, just one sec. I just want to introduce the dynamic trio, which is Kevin, who will hand it off to Taya on state federal grants, and then she's going to hand it off to Kim Hughes on DRAs, and then I'll come back and join you. Go ahead, Kevin.
You going out for a short meal or something, or are you just?
No, I'm here. I'm just going to mute.
Me too. I talked way too much last session.
All right, well, it's good to be with you. And if Rob will pull up, there we go. And go ahead and go to page 3. This is general fund, and the key point I wanted to show here is the green columns represents our cash balance at the end of March. And you'll see the cash balance this year was $203 million versus $197 in the prior year. So a slight increase there. The main reason relates to we continue to get property tax advance amounts from the Hamilton County Auditor. We actually just in the last day or so received our final settlement, and so that will get posted in April for the first half tax settlement that we received. The other thing too is expenditures are down, and I'll hit that a little bit on the next slide, but those two things in tandem have led to the higher cash balance. The next slide, please. This is a 3-year comparison of revenue. We're pretty well on target with last year. You'll see the 86.1%. That's the percent of our estimated revenue that we've actually received to this point, compared to 83 in the year before. And next slide, please. This one breaks down the revenue a little bit by source. The key things here, you'll notice the blue being our biggest source, which is the property taxes. We're at $315 last year versus $317 this year. And we're a little ahead of where we are budgeted for the full fiscal year. The green is state foundation primarily, which is down a little bit, and that's due to the cuts that were implemented late in the year last year and spread out over the year this year is a big reason for that. Next slide, please. This is a 3-year expenditure comparison. The last two blue columns. This year, our actual expenditure to date is $435 million versus $458 the year before. Again, the main reasons for this is cuts or delays in purchase service vendor contracts that have been made, and then also some of our expenditures in general fund have now been shifted to CARES. Next slide, please. This is a look taking the total budget for general fund, the $676 million, which is the working budget, so that includes the carryover encumbrances from the year before. Basically just breaking it down a little bit further to what's committed for salaries and benefits, what's anticipated for future transfers, and then the unallocated amount is the $42 million, which is about 6% of the overall budget. Next slide actually is going to switch over to school-wide pool. And then on the next page, just pointing out here, fairly consistent, fairly flat expenditures for this pool. Going on to the next slide. This will show you that as well, that $157 million in actual expenditures to date, which is 67%. Most of what is left there is committed for salary and benefits, and then there's a small amount of more discretionary spending, such as purchase services, supplies and materials, and that type of thing. Next slide, please. So this is just on the following page, just a visualization of the state and federal grants that Ty is going to talk about. Just showing here for state grants, expenditures, what's been of the 19 million, what's actually been expended, quite a bit of amount encumbered and committed, and then most of what is unallocated at this point relates to student wellness fund. And then we'll go on, the second slide will be, or the second page will be federal grants. Again, just a quick visualization of what she's going to talk about in that next section. So I do have a couple other small pieces that are in a different slide. One is the preschool report. And this is just a summary of the tuition assistance that is calculated based on early childhoods, presenting the number of days that kids are in seats that qualify for this piece of funding, the tuition assistance. So at the top, for the month of March, 374,000 is what was calculated based on those 602 kids receiving 8,853 service days. The purple line is kind of a fiscal year to date in terms of how many days have been provided, 602 students with 67,000 days, and then comparing that to the prior year. The next slide is kind of breaking down, showing the expenditures that are coded within the general fund as identified as preschool related. You'll see for revenues, the budget, the year to date, and the prior year to date are all fairly consistent. Again, it's all based on property tax revenues. And then for expenditures, 9.7 million this year versus 9 million last year. So again, things are fairly consistent, although you'll notice payments to United Way are a little higher this year versus last year. And some of that is timing and with the carryover there. And then I'll go to another slide. I have several. This will be my last. Relates to the 2008 certificates of participation with the proceeds spend down. That deadline is coming up this coming September. And so the two yellow columns, the 68,000 and the 41, are amounts that facilities is working through getting those expended by then. And then, as I mentioned last month, I believe the 600,000 that was initially part of the contingency budget, we're going to identify the expenditures to cover that as well. So that completes my section. If you want to move on or have questions or what you'd like to do at this point.
Members, do you have any questions for Kev? I'll just say real quickly that you can kind of see in some of these charts as we've been watching, that both the preschool and the other, you do start to see the visual representation of COVID in a way that I think is kind of interesting. Melanie or Ryan, any questions?
No. Don't.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Kevin, the second and third part of the trio, as the treasurer mentioned. Who do we have up? Kim?
It looks like it's me. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well.
Great.
We currently have one CRA that's being presented. It is for 2330 Apartment LLC, and this is going to be remodeling. And as a result, it's going to have improved commercial and office space with a cafe and yoga studio. This is a 15-year agreement, and the estimated annual revenue is $21,606.88. And the total revenue from this agreement will yield $324,133.26. So this is the only CRA that we have right now. Just to give a little tidbit, our second quarter billing for our CRAs are being prepped to go out in the month of May. And that's all the information that I have for our CRAs.
Well, and we know that Mrs. Bates is very, very interested in that billing process. There's some history there that she brought to our attention some years ago. So that's great that you guys have that under control now. Ms. Bates, comment?
Yeah. Do we know if this is market rate or is this for lower income families, or is that even part of the information?
I do not know, but we can certainly check it out. I could actually check the agreement to see if that type of information is indicated in there, but from the information I received, I don't really know at this point, but I can find out and follow up if you'd like.
Good.
That would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Messer, any questions, comments about that CRA?
Nope.
Do we
I'm sure
know
Ms.
if
Bates
this
is excited to vote on it.
no comment. Do we know with Treasurer or Kim, is this part of the new agreement, or are we still riding on the old agreement?
We are currently operating under the new agreement, where it's the 33% rather than the 25%.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. All right. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Are you up? Thanks, Kim.
Oh, I love this chart.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Taya Gringbondai, and this is a representation of the state and federal grants. And so our goal is to have 60% of the grant, 60% spend for the grants, and that's based on a 15-month grant cycle. We are in the 9th month of that 15-month cycle, so that's where the 60% is derived. And so really this is a summary of the total allocations for the state and federal grants, the expenditures, the encumbrances, and what is actually available. And so again, it's addressing, has the spend goal been met? So has that 60% spend goal been met? And so for the public, we have a total of 42 grants, and of those 42 grants, 15 of them have met or exceeded the 60% goal. So that's roughly around 36% of the grants. And so that leaves the remaining 64% have not met their spend goal, but some of them are pretty close. So there's some 54%, some 57%, so not quite at 60, but they're getting close. So we are diligently working with the budget managers to try to remove their barriers for spending to make sure they have access to all of their grant funds. And that is all I have. Are there any questions?
Bates or Mr. Messer?
Nope.
Ms. Bolden, can I just make a really quick comment? Go ahead.
Sure, absolutely, because I'm just going to compliment the chart, so go for it.
Yes, Taya's done a tremendous job working with managing the state and federal grants. And we realize this chart is very busy. It's very hard to look at online. And so Taya's working towards creating some visual charts. She'll still submit this level of detail in our report, but for presentations on when we're in Blue Jeans, she's going to try to get some charts together that'll be a little bit easier to read on a screen. So we're making progress. Good job, Taya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way we can monitor it, and I encourage members to access it, in our document form, so we can actually look at that. And I also like the transparency of us not just monitoring it, but demonstrating where we are with each of those. And the public needs to always be aware that there is the general fund, and then there's everything else. So this shows your efforts in managing all these dollars, and I like that, and I'm thrilled that the CRAs are up in our new agreement. So that's great.
Just one other little point is that Taya has a team of 5, including her, that manage those 42 grants. It's a lot of work.
I think it's fabulous. It's great.
Member Bolton, I do have to get to another meeting.
Yes, we have only one more thing. Go ahead, Mr.
Okay,
Messer.
good.
Okay, you ready for me to go on?
Yes.
Okay. So Rob, if you can pull my other PowerPoint back up real quick.
I do apologize for going over, but I think we've had a reasonably informative meeting. But
fabulous
yes,
meeting.
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to introduce a concept for you to think about. No decision today, but
yes.
The returning back to the committee of the whole meetings and removing a voting board meeting once a month may have some unintended consequences. One is that the time lapse between meetings grows. And so I just gave you a little bit of detail here that we were experiencing like 2 to 4 days between meetings for people to get their contracts and their purchases approved by the board. And some in April and May, they extend a little bit longer. And so I fear that we'll have a delay in services or an increase in then and nows. And so if you'll flip to the next slide, Rob. Here's a picture of what I'm talking about. I'm focusing in on the $25,000 to $50,000 spend. This is a representation of the contracts that we've approved for this year up through the end of March, I believe. And so those what I'm asking the committee to consider is increasing the value of authority that the treasurer has to move forward without board approval. Right now, I can move forward for anything under $25,000. And so I'm thinking that increasing that to $50,000 might help the situation a little bit. I'm not, we still will be fully transparent with those transactions, and so they'll still be reported on the treasurer's report as we do with the other ones as forward board information. But I don't want to slow progress and processes down too much. And so I just wanted, and I'm actually gathering some more data to bring back to you, but this is the initial data we looked at. The next slide shows the award of purchase orders. And as you can see, there's 16 in that pocket. And so I'm not as concerned about the purchase orders, but the contract for services. What we don't want is services to start without a purchase order, because that becomes a then and now, and could get us into audit trouble if we're not careful. And then, or if there are services that are really needed, urgent necessity, they have to wait and extend the period of time for approval. I think that was my last slide. Is there anything else? Okay, so you can take it down. So just something to think about.
So this is, good. Mr. Messer's been replaced by Mr. Joe there, I think. Yes. This is a conversation we can continue to have, correct?
Yeah.
Because we all love Cal after just one meeting.
Yes.
And it's something to contemplate. When you say transparency, it'd be transparent, but after it's already happened.
But in the treasurer's report that's immediately following, yes.
Okay. Ms. Bates or Joe?
We're good, aren't you, Joe?
Yes, he is. All right. Do we have any other items on the agenda? No, or for future topics? We're in good shape. He's smiling. He's having a great time because he realizes that the meeting is over. We all smile. Yes, I've noticed that. There you go, Joe. All right. Well, we really appreciate all the staff work and all the leadership work, and appreciate any members of the public that have participated in the meeting by watching. And it's my understanding that next month when we meet again, we will also once again be remote for May and be remote for June, fully remote, and then wait for the state to make some determinations about how long the extension for remote may be. But we have a couple of conversations we've had that we have to carry forward for the goals, and also certainly for this item, and also the timeline on evaluation. And we are happy to get the need that we need for get the discussion regarding the need for more preschool and where. And still the big elephant in the room is always going to be transportation. So appreciate everybody's efforts. And with that, unless there's anything else from anybody, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.